One day they were the most powerful civilization in the Americas. The next, gone, no war, no famine, no plague, just silence. In the year 900 AD, the Maya abandoned their greatest cities. Temples that had taken centuries to build were left to the jungle. Millions of people simply disappeared. And to this day, no one can fully explain what happened. Archaeologists have spent over a century searching for answers. They've found bones. They've found abandoned palaces. They've found calendars predicting events thousands of years into the future. But they haven't found the truth. Vanished without a trace. What could make an empire of millions abandon everything they built? What did they see coming that we don't? And here's what keeps historians awake at night. The Maya weren't primitive. They were geniuses. They calculated the length of a year more accurately than we did until the 20th century. They predicted solar eclipses centuries in advance. They built cities that rivaled ancient Rome. And then they walked away. Today, we're going to explore one of history's greatest mysteries. What really happened to the Maya? And what can their collapse teach us about our own civilization? Masters of time, before we understand how they fell, we need to understand how impossibly advanced they were. The Maya weren't just building pyramids. They were mapping the cosmos. Their calendar system was so precise, it could predict astronomical events 7,000 years into the future. Time is not a line, time is a wheel. While medieval Europeans were still debating whether the Earth was flat, Mayan astronomers had calculated the orbit of Venus with 99% accuracy. They did this without telescopes, without computers, using nothing but their eyes and mathematics. They developed the concept of zero independently, something that took other civilizations thousands of years to figure out. Their cities weren't random collections of buildings. They were astronomical instruments. The temple of Kukulkan at Chichen Itza creates a perfect shadow serpent on the spring equinox. This wasn't accident. This was precision engineering on a scale that still baffles modern architects. The Maya understood time in ways we're only beginning to appreciate. They tracked cycles within cycles within cycles, celestial patterns that took 52 years to repeat. They knew about precession, the 26,000-year wobble of Earth's axis. How? We still don't know, but this brings us to a disturbing question. Cities in the jungle. At their peak, the Maya controlled an area larger than modern Britain. Their population exceeded 10 million people, and their cities were marvels of engineering that shouldn't have been possible. Tikal, one of their greatest cities, had pyramids taller than any building in Europe at the time. Towering above the forest, the city housed over 100,000 people. It had reservoirs that could store millions of gallons of water. It had roads, markets, palaces, and ball courts where players competed in games that sometimes ended in human sacrifice. But here's what makes the Maya truly remarkable. They built all of this in one of the most challenging environments on Earth. The Yucatan jungle. No rivers, no lakes, brutal heat. And they thrived for over 2,000 years. They developed sophisticated agricultural techniques, raised fields, terraced hillsides, crop rotation systems that kept the soil fertile for generations. Thriving. By 800 AD, Mayan civilization was at its absolute peak. Cities were expanding. Population was growing. Trade networks stretched from Honduras to central Mexico. And then, everything changed. If their story is making you see ancient civilizations differently, hit like and subscribe for more forgotten history that shapes our world, because what comes next will shock you even more. The first warnings. The collapse didn't happen all at once. It crept, like a disease that shows no symptoms until it's too late. Around 760 AD, something began to change. Archaeologists studying lake sediments found evidence of severe droughts beginning in the late 8th century. The rains stopped coming, and they didn't come back. For a civilization that depended on seasonal rainfall, this was catastrophic. But drought alone doesn't explain what happened. The Maya had survived droughts before. They had built sophisticated water storage systems. They had adapted to their environment for millennia. No, something else was happening. something the Maya themselves may have caused. We do not inherit the earth from our ancestors. We borrow it from our children. Recent research suggests the Maya were deforesting their land at an alarming rate. They needed wood for fuel, wood for construction, wood for making the plaster that covered their buildings. A single building could require burning acres of forest, trees falling, cities rising, and as the forests disappeared, the rainfall patterns changed. The Maya were creating their own drought. They were engineering their own extinction. But even this isn't the full story. Warfare escalates. When resources become scarce, humans do what humans have always done. They fight. Archaeological evidence shows that Mayan warfare intensified dramatically in the 9th century. What had once been ritualistic conflicts, designed to capture prisoners, not conquer territory, became total war. Annihilation. Cities that had traded peacefully for centuries began attacking each other. Das Pilas, a major center, was conquered and burned. Its population either fled or was killed. The fortifications grew desperate, walls built not from planned construction, but from dismantled temples. They were tearing apart their sacred buildings to defend against their neighbors. Brother killing brother, city destroying city. Inscriptions from this period tell stories of kings captured, tortured, and sacrificed. The political system that had maintained order for 1,000 years was collapsing. But here's what makes this truly haunting. The Maya weren't fighting to expand. They were fighting to survive. And in their desperation, they may have accelerated their own destruction. More war meant more refugees. More refugees meant more pressure on remaining resources. More pressure meant more war. A spiral that no one could stop. And still, we haven't reached the darkest part. The king's fall. The Maya had a divine contract with their rulers. Kings weren't just political leaders. They were intermediaries between humans and the gods. They performed rituals. They shed their own blood. They kept the cosmic order in balance. The king who cannot bring rain is no king at all. But what happens when the rains don't come? What happens when the harvests fail? What happens when the king performs every ritual, makes every sacrifice, and the gods remain silent? Faith crumbles when prayers fail. The people lost faith, not just in their kings, in the entire system. Archaeological evidence shows that royal monuments simply stopped being built after 900 AD. The elaborate stone calendars recording the achievements of kings, they just end. The gods had abandoned them, or so they believed. Some kings were likely killed by their own people. Others may have simply walked away. The palaces weren't destroyed, they were abandoned. Royal treasures left behind. Sacred spaces converted into humble housing for commoners who stayed. The entire political structure that had defined Mayan civilization for over 1,000 years evaporated, but the cities themselves remained. And this leads us to the strangest part of the mystery. The Great Exodus. They didn't die. They left. This is what confuses historians the most. The classic Mayan collapse wasn't a mass extinction event. It was a migration. Millions of people, over the course of a few generations, simply walked away from the greatest cities their ancestors had ever built. They left their temples to the trees and never looked back. Where did they go? Some moved north to the Yucatan coast, where there was more water. Some scattered into smaller villages in the highlands. Some may have been absorbed into other cultures entirely. The jungle reclaimed everything. Within a few generations, pyramids that had dominated the skyline were swallowed by roots and vines. Cities that had housed hundreds of thousands became home only to jaguars and monkeys. Abandoned, forgotten, lost forever. The Spanish wouldn't arrive for another 600 years. When they did, they found descendants of the Maya living in villages, speaking the old languages, practicing fragments of the old religions. But the great cities, the Spanish had to hack through jungle to find them. Even the Maya themselves had forgotten where their ancestors had built their greatest achievements. But why? Why leave everything behind? Theories and truths. Historians have debated this for over a century, and they've never agreed on a single answer. 1. Climate collapse from drought cycles. 2. Environmental destruction from deforestation. 3. Endless warfare depleting resources. 4. Disease epidemics weakening population. 5. Social revolution against failed rulers. The truth is probably all of these, and none of these, because the Maya collapse teaches us something uncomfortable about how civilizations actually fall. Complex systems don't fail for simple reasons. They fail from the weight of accumulated vulnerabilities. The Maya didn't face one catastrophe. They faced a cascade. Each problem made every other problem worse. Drought reduced food. Less food meant more war. More war meant more refugees. More refugees meant more pressure on remaining resources. More pressure meant more deforestation. More deforestation meant worse droughts. A feedback loop of destruction that no one could escape. And the most terrifying part, the Maya saw it happening. Their own inscriptions describe the droughts. Their own records show the wars. They weren't ignorant of their fate. They were powerless to stop it. Sound familiar? Echoes in time. Here's where this story becomes personal, because everything the Maya experienced, we're experiencing now. Climate change, resource depletion. We're depleting our resources at unprecedented rates. We're changing our climate in ways we don't fully understand. We're watching political systems strain under pressures they weren't designed to handle. The Maya had a population of millions. We have billions. The Maya deforested a peninsula. We're deforesting the entire planet. Repeating, the Maya collapse took about 150 years from first warnings to total abandonment. Their environmental damage accumulated over centuries. Ours is accelerating exponentially. We have the same vulnerabilities, but far less time to respond. But here's the crucial difference. The Maya didn't have the knowledge we have. They didn't understand the connection between deforestation and rainfall. They didn't have the technology to adapt. They couldn't see the full picture. We can. We have satellites showing us exactly what's happening to our forests. We have climate models predicting what's coming. We have the tools to change course. The question is whether we'll use them, or whether, like the Maya, we'll keep building our temples until the very end. What survived? The Maya didn't disappear. This is perhaps the most misunderstood part of their story. 7 million Maya live today. They speak their ancestral languages. They practice traditions stretching back thousands of years. We are not a dead civilization. We are a living people with a long memory. The civilization collapsed. The people endured, they adapted, they survived the Spanish conquest. They survived centuries of oppression. They survived attempts to erase their language and culture, and they're still here. In the highlands of Guatemala, Mayan farmers still use agricultural techniques developed by their ancestors. In the Yucatan, Mayan speakers number in the millions. The knowledge wasn't entirely lost, it was preserved, passed down, adapted. Empires fall, cultures survive, people endure. This might be the most important lesson of all. The Maya didn't need their great cities to continue being Maya. They carried their culture with them when they left. The pyramids crumbled, but the knowledge persisted. And perhaps that's what really matters when civilizations face collapse. Not the buildings, the people, not the monuments, the wisdom. The final lesson. So what really happened to the Maya? The honest answer, we'll never know with complete certainty. The cities fell silent. The records stopped. The jungle erased almost everything. But we know enough to understand the pattern. Pride before the fall. A civilization that believed it had mastered its environment. That believed its kings spoke to the gods. That believed its cities would stand forever. They were wrong. Not because they were primitive, but because they were human. Those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it. The Maya collapse isn't ancient history. It's a warning, a blueprint of how advanced civilizations can fall apart when they ignore the limits of their world. The jungle didn't destroy the Maya. The Maya destroyed themselves, and then the jungle simply reclaimed what was always hers. The temples still stand today, half buried in roots and vines. Tourists visit them by the millions. Archaeologists study them decade after decade, but the Maya who built them are gone. Their descendants remember fragments. Their glory lives only in stone, and in the lessons we refuse to learn. The Maya Empire didn't vanish overnight. That's the myth. The truth is darker. It took generations. Slow enough that each generation thought things would get better, fast enough that no one could stop it. Decline is always gradual. They watched their crops fail and blamed the gods. They watched their cities crumble and blamed their kings. They watched their world collapse and never realized. They were the architects of their own destruction. The greatest civilizations don't fall from external enemies. They collapse from internal decay. Today, their temples stand as monuments to human achievement and human hubris. We can visit them. We can study them. We can marvel at their precision, their beauty, their ambition. But can we learn from them? That's the question that haunts me. Can we? The Maya had 2,000 years of accumulated wisdom. They built wonders that still inspire awe. They mapped the heavens with impossible accuracy. And when the end came, none of it saved them. Knowledge without action is just decoration. If you made it this far, comment jungle swallows all if this story changed how you see civilization. Because understanding the past is the only way to change the future. The truth is never comfortable, but it's always worth knowing. History has more to teach us. Subscribe if you want to learn. Until next time, stay curious, stay vigilant.